Good morning, St. Lucia. It is a Tuesday, November 16, 2021, and we're in downtown Castries, bringing into you live the Parliament of St. Lucia, the House of Assembly, the sitting of the House of Assembly. I am Lucia Joseph, welcoming you to the broadcast by the Government Information Service National Television Network. Alongside me is, as always, the trusted colleague, Primus Hutchinson. The sitting of the House of Assembly today, we will be seeing, and just go through the order paper for you, we will be seeing the oath being taken by the member for Miko South. Since the new Parliament of St. Lucia convened, the member for Miko South has not been at the sittings of the House of Assembly, and so we will be seeing that. There will be some announcements by the Speaker, Honorable Claudius J. Francis. Statements by ministers will also take place, and a number of papers to be laid. Papers will be laid by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Development. That is the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. We'll also be seeing papers being laid by the Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, the Minister for Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology and Vocational Training, Honorable Sean Edward, and papers will also be laid by the Minister for Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs, Honorable Moses Jabatis. We will also be seeing papers laid by the Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, as well as the Minister for Infrastructure, Ports, Transport, Physical Development and Urban Renewal, Honorable Stevenson King. There are two motions on the floor today, and the Parliament is going to give authorization to the Attorney General to make an order to declare the 2019 supplement of the revised edition of the Laws of St. Lucia as specified in the order to come into force. The other resolution will be for Parliament to affirm the resolution and approve the draft of value-added tax amendment for Schedules 1 and 3, which amends the Act in order to do two things. To include a zero-rated service in the supply by Hazama Ando Corporation and Nippon Koyo Company Limited, and so these companies are involved in the reconstruction of bridges in the cul-de-sac basin, to look for some exemptions there, and also in Schedule 3 exemptions to facilitate the barrel concessions that government give around this time, Christmas time. There are also three bills the Honorable Prime Minister will be presenting for first readings: the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment, as well as the St. Lucia National Economic Fund Amendment. And the Minister for Commerce, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, will be presenting for first reading the Distribution of Price of Goods Amendment. So it's going to be a very full day in the House of Assembly, and we're very happy to be able to bring you all of that live on the National Television Network. Let me say bonjour pour Primus. Bonjour Primus.
Bonjour Lisa, bonjour messieurs, mesdames. Nous, quand consiste aujourd'hui pour l'autre session quand consiste côté Premier ministre et le membre Parlement qui a présenté diverses motions et bills pour discuter. Maintenant, ce qui est fait aujourd'hui, c'est le Parlement pour soutenir qui est surmonté, qui consiste comme la coutume diverses motions pour présenter qui le Premier ministre l'a fait avec les autres ministres ministres qui ont responsabilité pour affaires commerce, affaires consommateurs et coopératifs, deux ou trois ministres pour construction, travaux, transport. Parmi ces motions, c'est le Premier ministre qui a fait, nous avons discuté ça aussi, la des billes qui est présenté, il y a pas Premier ministre, ministre des Finances, et aussi ministre de l'Affaires et Commerce, qui a fait présentation aussi. Nous avons fait une session qui a commencé tout de suite comme c'est mon parlement, genre, bon d'autres, genre acide, qui a fait pour la session, ça a commencé.
Perhaps what will always be saying, the statement by the Prime Minister later on when the House convenes will also be sort of an address or statement by the Prime Minister regarding the first 100 days of the administration. And one would think that the 100 days, Prime Minister, has gone by so quickly, time really does fly. But the achievement of the administration, and we've been seeing that the list provided by the Office of the Prime Minister has been extensive, expansive, and so we'll be hearing from the Honorable Prime Minister on what the 100-day journey has been like for the administration, and well, certainly it also sets the tone, Primus, for the path that the administration will be taking the country on. So it is really indicative of what it is, the plans that the administration has for the people and nation of the Lucia.
Oui, Lucia, comme on dit, pour mentionner côté, ça que il y en a c'est ça qui est plus intéressant que pour cette session aujourd'hui, c'est côté chaque parlement qui fait une présentation sur ça a déjà accompli pour 100 jours qui depuis le gouvernement à l'entrée au pouvoir que chaque membre parlement qui fait une présentation sur ça il a déjà accompli et que ça le gouvernement a déjà accompli pour 100 jours depuis le gouvernement à là pouvoir et ça a fait en session qui constitue bon matière.
Yes, and we are due to begin shortly. The Speaker of the House was in here just before coming on air, as he normally does, as he would come up and see what is happening in the chamber. He would pass around, do his greetings, salutations, and a very involved speaker, always very present, never too far off from what's happening in the chamber. So we are due to have the sitting convene momentarily, but just to inform you of some of the members that you would see seated already. The Honorable Prime Minister is already seated, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, as well as the Attorney General is already seated. We see Honorable Sean Edward there as well. Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire is also there, and they too are engaged in just some chatter right there. And the Honorable Alva Baptiste, Honorable Moses Jean-Baptiste is seated, Honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Coyote, Honorable Kenson Casme is always there, and to see Honorable Richard Fenchurch has just gotten up and taken the walk over to the Prime Minister. Honorable Wayne Girard is also present and seated, and we can see as well Honorable Jeremiah Norbert. On the opposition side, we do see the leader of the opposition, Honorable Alan Chasney, who is speaking there at the far end of the chamber to fellow senators there. I believe Senator Farrah Polius as well as Senator Dominic Fede, and we do see Honorable having some conversations, lots of movement around the chamber. Honorable Bradley Felix is also seated there at the far end. As with anything else, the COVID-19 continues to dictate how the House of Assembly conducts business. As you know, that since the onset of COVID-19, the chamber, the galleries, not been filled with members of the public, We do, however, occasionally joined by select individuals. In the inner chambers, the gallery of the chambers there, we do have members of the government of St. Lucia in terms of the public servants, the permanent secretaries, the registers, heads of departments, and so forth. Occasionally, we do see the presence of members of the diplomatic corps. We have been given the indication from the Sergeant at Arms that the Speaker of the House of Assembly is making his way to the chamber, and so momentarily the House will be convening. We have just seen their primers, the entry of Honorable Joachim Henry.
Parmi ces billes là, Lisa, qui a attiré ça, c'est yon qui peut faire comme ça.
Let us pray.
Good morning, everyone. Today's scripture comes to us from John chapter 15, verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you may go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all wisdom, all counsel, and all understanding, we thine unworthy servants, here gathered together, in thy name do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, wisdom to direct and to guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interest, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name. The maintenance of true religion, and the justice and the safety and honor and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the united and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, and through Christian love, charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Good morning, members. Madam Deputy Clerk, could you administer the oath?
I, Alan Michael Chastney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to St. Lucia, that I will uphold and defer the Constitution and the laws of St. Lucia, and I will consciously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of St. Lucia. So help me God.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Honorable members, I have received explanations for the absence from the honorable members for Vieux-Fort South, Soufrière Fort Saint-Jacques, and Dennery South. And as a consequence of the absence of the member for Soufrière Fort Saint-Jacques, those papers and SIs standing in her name will be dealt with by the Minister for Youth and Sport. I would also like to inform members of two conferences which will be hosted by the Parliament of St. Lucia. The first will be our post-election conference, which is scheduled to take place from November 30th to December 2nd. I'm positive that all parliamentarians have received that date and will ensure full participation. The second is a Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians virtual conference, which is scheduled for the 7th and the 8th of December 2021. The theme for this conference is, quote, Strong Women, Strong Region, Economic Empowerment of Women, unquote. The member for Soufrière is the point person for this conference, and 2 meetings have already been held at the Parliament to engage all female parliamentarians in preparation for the conference. I want to express my appreciation for members of both sides who have attended those meetings thus far. And I do hope that all of the female parliamentarians will take part in the conference. In conjunction with the presiding officer of the Senate, it has become clear to us that our Parliament has been somewhat deficient in not appointing a committee to deal with the Parliamentary Commissioner. A literal reading of our Constitution would indicate that the Parliamentary Commissioner is in fact a creature of the Parliament, hence the name, and the reports ought to be scrutinized by the committee. And rather than have 2 committees, the President of the Senate and myself have agreed, and in keeping with the terms of the standing orders of both houses, to a joint select committee rather than 2 separate committees. And we will be liaising with the leader of government business, the leader of opposition business of both houses to finalize the composition of that select committee. This Honorable House has also been made aware that the member for Castries South celebrated a birthday last week, and on behalf of the Parliament of St. Lucia, I wish you happy belated birthday greetings. Members, today is an historic day for more than one reason. With the attendance of the Micoud South MP, this House is now constituted with 4 individuals who have held the highest political office in the land, that of Prime Minister. A second historic aspect is that I must now pronounce on one of these 4 individuals. It is not a choice which is mine to avoid. For when I was elected Speaker by the members of this august body, I swore to be fair and impartial, and to ensure our rules and procedures were observed by all, regardless of their station. When I sit here as Speaker, my fidelity is not to anyone or any party, but instead to the House standing orders and the Constitution of St. Lucia. My decisions will never have any umbilical cord tied with being popular or catering to the majority, minority, or even to public opinion. What I do today is my sacred and sworn duty from which I dare not shirk. Shirking is in fact not an option. General elections were held in St. Lucia on Monday, the 26th of July, 2021. Section 54 of the Constitution states, and I quote, "Each session of Parliament shall be held at such place within St. Lucia, and shall be in at such time, not being later than 12 months from the end of the preceding session, if Parliament has been prorogued, or 1 month from the holding of a general election of members of the House, if Parliament has been dissolved, as the Governor General shall appoint by proclamation," unquote. Parliament met for the first time following the election on the 14th of August 2021. The MP from Micoud South was not present. Parliament met a further 2 times, and the MP from Micoud South was also not present. On each occasion, he submitted an electronic note to the clerk regarding his unavailability. Standing Order 80 subsection 2 of the House Standing Orders states, quote, "If without the written leave of the Speaker, any member is in any one session absent from the House for more than 6 consecutive meetings, that member shall, subject to paragraph 3 of this order, vacate his seat in the House under section 34 of the St. Lucia Constitution Order 1978. Paragraph 3 of that same standing order states, and I quote, "Where member A fails to obtain due leave of absence, and B, within 15 days after the session on which the member was absent, as aforesaid, satisfies the Speaker in writing that such failure was unavoidable, paragraph 2 of this order shall not apply to that member." Section 34 of the Constitution headed Tenure of Office states, and I quote, subsection 1, "A member of the House, hereinafter in this section referred to as a member, shall vacate his seat in the House at the next dissolution of Parliament after his election." Subsection 2, "A member shall also vacate his seat in the House if he is absent from the sitting of the House for such period and in such circumstances as may be prescribed in the rules of procedure of the House." I have already stated what the standing orders mandate. It is clear that 6 sittings of the House have not taken place. It is also clear that the member from Micoud South has by electronic note on each occasion of his absence advised the clerk of his absence. It would therefore be left only for the Speaker on the 7th absent to decide whether the explanation given is in the language of the standing order, quote, "satisfactory," unquote, to the Speaker before any expulsion process can be undertaken. The fact is, we never got to the 7th sitting stage, and therefore the point of expulsion becomes moot. What remains very alive is whether the reason given by the member from Micoud South meet, quote, "the satisfactory test." This is necessary as it directly affects whether he should be remunerated as an MP. Standing Order 80 subsection 1 states, "Any member who is prevented from attending a meeting of the House shall acquaint the Speaker as early as possible of his inability to attend." It is my humble view that someone becomes a member of Parliament not by virtue of the oath taken at the sitting, but instead, in the case of the House of Assembly, upon election to the seat as certified by the returning officer. I will, however, readily concede that the oath is necessary to allow participation, among other things, in debates. In this regard, I reference Standing Order 1 of the House of Assembly, which states, quote, "Except for the purpose of electing a Speaker, no member of the House shall sit or vote therein until he has taken and subscribed to the oath of allegiance," unquote. Inherent in the reading of that standing order is that the person is a member at the time of electing a speaker, but is prevented from doing any more unless and until the oath is taken. Consequently, it is only after taking the oath of office that a member becomes entitled to the full rights and benefits of a member of parliament. In the case Chandresh Sharma and others, and the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, the issue before the Privy Council was, and I quote, whether the claimants who had not been sworn are entitled to remuneration as members of the House of Representatives, in our case the House, for a period beginning 11 December 2001 and ending on 6 October 2002. The Privy Council Law Lord stated at paragraph 2, and I quote, in a general election held on the 10th of December 2001, the 18 appellants, all members of the United National Congress, the UNC, were elected to the House of Representatives, the House. In the ordinary course, the House would, at its first meeting after the election, and before proceeding to the dispatch of any other business, have elected a Speaker and Deputy Speaker pursuant to Section 50 of the 1976 Constitution. The appellants would then, in accordance with Section 57 of the Constitution, have taken the oath of allegiance prescribed in the first schedule of the Constitution. They would thereupon have become entitled to participate fully in the business of the House and to payment of a parliamentary salary at the approved rate with effect from 11 December 2001, the day after the poll. Unquote. Section 54 of the St. Lucia Constitution is similar in all regards to Section 50 of Trinidad and Tobago's Constitution. I return to the Privy Council case, where the law lords continued at paragraph 3, and I quote, the Trinidad and Tobago general election yielded an exact equality of seats in the House to the People's National Movement and the UNC, each party winning 18 seats. Neither party therefore had a majority in the House. The President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, acting under Section 76(1)(b) of the Constitution, appointed Mr. Patrick Manning, the leader of the PNM, as Prime Minister on the 24th of December 2001. Mr. Manning acted promptly in appointing ministers. On the 26th December 2001, with effect from that same date, he appointed the remaining 17 members of his party, all as ministers. The law lords continue at paragraph 4. Pursuant to a presidential proclamation made pursuant to Section 67(1) of the Constitution, the new Parliament met for the first time after the general election on 5th April 2002. On that day and the following day, the House attempted but failed to elect a Speaker. Because of the equality of votes on each side of the House, there was no majority in favor of any member put forward by either party and no majority in favor of any outside candidate. There was thus an impasse. On the 6th of April 2002, Parliament was prorogued. On the 28th of August 2002, Parliament met again and the House again tried to elect a Speaker, but it remained deadlocked and was unable to make an election. On 30th August 2002, the President dissolved Parliament and a general election was held on the 7th of October 2002. In this election, the PNM won a clear majority of seats and the previous deadlock was not repeated. But the appellants were aggrieved because no Speaker had been elected in the previous Parliament. They had been unable to take the oath of allegiance, although it has never been suggested they were not entirely ready to do so. And because they had not taken the oath of allegiance, the House authorities held they were not entitled to draw a salary. The appellants were the more aggrieved because their PNM opponents, all in receipt of ministerial salaries, suffered no comparable detriment, unquote. The 23rd 2004 edition of Erskine May's Treatise on the Law, Privileges, Proceedings, and Usage of Parliament describes the United Kingdom practice very clearly on pages 27 and 28. And I quote, "The salary of a member becomes payable when he takes the oath or makes the affirmation required by law and begins from the day following that on which the poll is held. A member who has not taken the oath is not entitled to claim any salary prior to the date that he takes the oath." It goes on, "A person who is a member at the time of a dissolution of Parliament continues to receive his salary until the end of the day of the poll in the consequent general election." The foregoing properly reflects the practice of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Clearly, as per Mays, what I just read, that even though one is entitled to be paid from the day following the poll, this is contingent upon the oath being taken. In the Sharma case earlier cited, the members of Parliament were ready and willing to take the oath, whereas in the instant matter, the member from Micoud South, on his own volition, absented himself from the meetings where the oath would have been administered. Some may suggest that following the general elections and at the date of the member's departure, a speaker had not yet been elected. That would be in error, for the House of Assembly is never without a speaker simply by virtue of a general election result. Only that he ceased to be a member of the House on a dissolution of Parliament until the House first meets after the dissolution, unquote. In simpler language, the Constitution is clear, pellucid, and unambiguous in its order that a speaker remains in office until the first sitting of the House following a general election where a new speaker is elected. There is, of course, a caveat to the speaker demitting office where the speaker following the election is elected to the position of minister or parliamentary secretary, but this does not apply here. It was only when this current House met at 10 o'clock in the forenoon on Tuesday the 14th of August 2021 that my immediate predecessor properly and legally demitted office. Clearly then, there was always a speaker in currency and permission could have been sought from him. None was. Consequently, on a proper construction of the standing orders, and as so eloquently and clearly stated in Mays, a member would not be entitled to be paid as an MP, and as per the Sharma case earlier cited, not simply because of the absence of the oath, but more importantly, because of the circumstances attendant to the oath not being taken until an oath is in fact taken. In the Trinidad case, all of the 18 members wished to be sworn in and were indeed present, willing, and available to be sworn. The frustration which resulted in them not being sworn was the House's inability to elect a speaker, which exercise must be completed prior to a swearing in. In the instant case, the member's absence was consequent upon a conscious decision by him to be elsewhere. These then are two different circumstances altogether. There is to the matter of the excuses proffered for the absences from the sitting. The member from Micoud South is well aware of the provisions of Section 54 of the St. Lucia Constitution regarding the timing of the first sitting of Parliament following the general elections. Indeed, in a previous life, it was he who had to initiate that first meeting. Even armed with that knowledge that the opening of Parliament was constitutionally mandated to be held within a prescribed period, 1 month, he chose to absent himself from the sitting. Standing Order 80 of the House Orders, though already stated, bears repeating here. Where a member fails to obtain due leave of absence and be within 15 days after the session on which the member was absent, as aforesaid, satisfies the Speaker in writing that such failure was unavoidable, paragraph 2 of this order shall not apply to that member. Subsection 1 of that same standing order speaks to acquainting the Speaker of each absence from a meeting. Further, Standing Order 87.1 states, quote, in any matter not herein provided for, resort shall be had to the usage and practice of the House of Commons of the Parliament of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which shall be followed as far as the same be applicable to this House and not inconsistent with these standing orders nor the practice of this House, unquote. Earlier, I acknowledged that in advance of each meeting, which he did not attend, the MP from Miku South did send an electronic note to that effect to the clerk. For the purposes of the operations of the office of the Parliament, a note to the clerk has to be construed as being a note to the Speaker. So let the record therefore reflect that I did receive these notes indicating an inability of the member from Miku South to be present. Unfortunately, the notes gave no reason other than being out of state for his absence. The only communication upon which a Speaker can take comfort and cognizance is what is officially sent to the Parliament, whether to the clerk or to the Speaker. Whatever is said elsewhere is of no moment to the office of the Parliament and can form no part in the Speaker's determination. The notes of the member from Miku South merely informing the office of the Speaker that, quote, I'll be out of state and will not be able to attend the above sitting of the House, unquote, cannot meet the standard, quote, to obtain due leave of absence stated in Standing Order 80. Consequently, having read the notes sent to the clerk, which I repeat are the only documents upon which I can properly base a decision, I am not satisfied that the member from Miku South's absence was unavoidable. Accordingly, I will make an order that the member from Miku South be denied remuneration for the period of his absence. The member and I have had a discussion earlier today, as a consequence of which I will stay this order for a further 2 weeks to allow him a second opportunity so to do. Otherwise, this order shall take effect on November 30th, 2021. I was minded to have also included in that order a denial of his constituency allowance, but I am aware that such an order would negatively impact employees located within the constituency office and would also bring unnecessary dispute between the office of the Parliament and the utility companies which services the office. Whilst the lease for such an office is of course between the landlord and the parliamentary representative, it is the office of the Parliament which meets the cost of the utility services. Consequently, my order will not extend further than the personal emoluments of the member. In conclusion, it is perhaps a fitting time to set guidelines for the future. No ruling can apply simply to one member, be it the member from Miku South or any other. The Parliament of St. Lucia is a co-equal arm of government, and it cannot and must not be treated as an appendage or a thing of convenience. There are rules, and these rules do not make exceptions for one member or another. Members who are going to be absent would necessarily have to inform the office of the Parliament in advance. On the occasions when this is not possible, they ought to do so with alacrity immediately thereafter. Further, the reason for their absence has to meet the standards set out in Standing Order 80 and not otherwise. Parliament is a place where the most serious business of the country takes place. It is where laws are passed which affect every single member of our society. It is the only body under the Constitution authorized to permit the borrowing of money, which borrowing impacts not just the today, but indeed the tomorrow. I will not therefore allow this chamber to descend into irrelevance. If all of that having been said, I want to assure members that this presiding officer is not unmindful of the fact that things come up suddenly and without warning, which things may necessitate their immediate absence. All I ask, not out of respect for me, but instead out of respect for this great institution, that we at all times treat it with the respect it deserves and the dignity it can ill afford to be estranged from. I dare say, Parliament deserves nothing less, for it is not accidental that the legislature, not the executive, not the judiciary, but the legislature is the first arm of government referenced in the Constitution of St. Lucia, our supreme law. That is not an accident. I thank you. Statements of ministers? Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, yeah, I think I want to get the program. Mr. Speaker, I will resist the strong temptation to speculate who started it, when or why. But this first 100 days in office thing, I won't call it a promise, has become a regular part of election time campaigning. However, time and experience have taught us the folly in biting off more than we can chew. From the mistakes of the past, we have learned to be careful not to knowingly make impossible promises. And if perchance we should in good faith make an election time promise, only to discover upon taking office, and through no fault of our own, it cannot be delivered, we will be upfront and honest enough to tell the people the reasons why. We trust and respect St. Lucians enough always to tell them the truth, even when the truth is not good news. Which reminds me, while John F. Kennedy was working on his inaugural address with his speechwriters, the president at one point said, "I'm sick of reading how we're planning another 100 days of miracles. Let's put in the speech that these things we're talking about won't all be finished in 100 days or in 1,000 years." Actually, the speech Kennedy delivered read, "All this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, not even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet, but let us make a start." So, Mr. Speaker, we have made a start, and if I say so myself, what a fine start. it especially. Considering the unprecedented times we are living in and the unavoidable problems that this government and our people have inherited, the way we have started is a fine indication of where we are determined to be before this administration has reached the halfway mark of its first term. It also underscores our sworn commitment, regardless of circumstances, always to put the people of St. Lucia first. My government's first 100 days has been approached with a delicate mix of patience, stability, and honoring our commitments to the people of St. Lucia. We have been faithful to observing the rules by which our country is supposed to be governed, the Constitution. We have had the courage to be true to the Constitution and appointed a deputy speaker from our side. I understand the impatience of some who desired immediate action and changes to correct some of the wrongs that have been committed against the citizens of our country. Necessary as some of these institutional changes are, there is need to follow process, lest we appear autocratic and emotionally driven in the exercise of our decision making. I am in possession of a draft bill that will lead to the appointment of a special prosecutor, which, when agreed to by Cabinet, will be tabled in Parliament for consideration by this Honourable House. The reckless financial management of our country during the last administration is worse than we had initially thought. Under the last administration, St. Lucia had been left on the edge of a financial cliff, which requires prudent financial management if we have to avoid falling into a financial abyss. The former government, even before the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, had already placed the country in a financial mess. The situation was worsened by the COVID pandemic. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, the St. Lucian economy was highly indebted and unsustainable and badly managed before COVID. The economy of St. Lucia experienced a negative 23% decline, the highest in the region. St. Lucia borrowed the most in the Eastern Caribbean Monetary Authority and presently has the highest debt portfolio in the OECS Monetary Authority. Debt servicing, Mr. Speaker, accounts for 31% of total revenue. Mr. Speaker, allow me to briefly outline the state of the finances of our country when we elected to government in July 2021. The St. Lucia debt portfolio was as follows. Sovereign public debt, 3.923 billion. Local payables, 154 million. Design finance contracts for roads, 184.5 million to be repaid after 5 years. Other commitments not accounted for, like land acquisition due to landowners, 60 million. Amount due to the University of the West Indies, 27 million. Other balances due by ministries, example, the Ministry of Economic Development is indebted to work under the Constituency Development Program of 4.18 million, even if the grant allocation by the Taiwanese was provided to cover CDP payments. Mr. Speaker, the United Workers' Party government received 5 loans, totaling 323.8 million from 4 existing international creditors. As at July 31st, 2021, the former government had used 301 million, meaning that of the COVID borrowings, my government only benefited from $19 million of these loans. My government is only able to draw down on a $10 million US loan from the Republic of Taiwan. We have found a situation where government expenses have to be financed from revenue, internal revenue, rollover financing and bond financing and treasury bills. For the last 3 months and before the next budget cycle begins, we have no access to institutional lending as was available to the last governments. The management of the effects of COVID-19, in particular the presence of the Delta variant, has compounded the challenges faced by my government. Fortunately, we have managed to stabilize in-country spread of the virus, and initial indicators are that we are doing a lot better. However, we must not drop our guard. We must remain vigilant by following the prescribed COVID-19 protocols to avoid any resurgence of the virus. I want to thank the first responders, the doctors and nurses for the efforts in the COVID battle. We also urge citizens to get vaccinated in order to hasten the return to normal life in our beloved country, St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to St. Jude Hospital. Mr. Speaker, it has been the solemn promise of my government to complete the St. Jude Hospital, which we continued to work on in 2011 when we elected back into office, until construction was stopped by the former government in an act of political retribution and selfish vindictiveness. Mr. Speaker, allow me to further update honorable members on the status of the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. Parliament will recall that I spoke to this issue on Tuesday, September 14, 2021. The review committee that I spoke of has completed its assignment and handed over the final reports. However, there are some critical findings of note which need to be reported to this honorable House. The review committee estimates that the new hospital remains less than 30% complete, and it would be impractical to work on the hospital in the bottom floor while in the top floor while patients were housed on the bottom floor. Impractical. The St. Jude Hospital report status, dated July 29, 2021, and prepared by the National Authorization Officer, NAO, of the Ministry of Economic Development, has the expenditure on phase 2 from commencement in February 2019 to July 2021 at EC 118.05 million. The status report states that an amount of 89.3 million has been paid to date and the remainder is still owed. In relation to the new hospital, the review committee found that there is no program for the completion of any part of phase 2 of the new hospital to facilitate the transfer of the operations from the George Odlum Stadium to the St. Jude Hospital into part or all of level 2 of the new hospital. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the United Workers' Party government failed in its duty to provide health care to the people of the South by not completing the St. Jude Hospital. The decision was deliberate, callous, and aimed at financially benefiting members of the administration and their friends. As we continue to aim at providing adequate health care to the people of St. Lucia, we will complete the construction of St. Jude Hospital Phase 1. In this regard, we will seek engagement of power to identify a senior level czar to coordinate and provide general oversight to the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. However, Mr. Speaker, we will seek to find out at the appropriate time if taxpayers' funds were used in a prudent and honest manner in the construction of the so-called new St. Jude Hospital. Hiwanora International Airport. The redevelopment of the Hiwanora International Airport has been a policy priority of the government of St. Lucia for more than a decade. Commencement and implementation of the HIA project has been impacted by political, economic, and financial factors, and more recently, a health pandemic. In August 2021, the Cabinet of Ministers of St. Lucia appointed a committee to review the HIA redevelopment project and to offer recommendations related to the project scope and financing arrangements with a view to identifying fiscal space for reallocation to other priority projects of the government. So the term of the appointment, though the term of the appointment is for 90 days from August 30, 2021, the committee submitted an interim report containing initial findings, critical issues which have been observed during the review, and urgent recommendations. The committee found that the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, SLASPA, entered into a construction contract with Taiwan-based firm Overseas Engineering and Construction Company Limited, OECC, for the execution of the redevelopment of the terminal building of HIA. The selection of OECC was solely determined by the political directorate, devoid of competitive bidding. By letter dated February 20th, 2019, the general manager of SLASPA was given these instructions by the then Prime Minister. SLASPA also engaged the Florida-based architectural firm CBRE HWRY, previously known as Harry S&G, comprised of Harry International Company, a Georgian corporation, and S&G Incorporated, a Florida corporation wholly owned by Harry International Company. Harry and SLG formed part of the consortium with asphalt and mining, which SLASPA had attempted to pursue the airport redevelopment utilizing a design finance model in 2010. The A&M consortium was paid US $2 million, or approximately $5.738 million, for the intellectual property rights to the airport designs. These same designs were used and modified by the current architects, who were engaged at a contract price of approximately $15.9 million or $42.9 million EC. It is important to note that an addendum to this contract with an amended scope of services and costs was signed by the chairman of SLASPA on June 24, 2021. Executive Consulting and Management Services, ECMS, was retained by contract agreement dated July 19, 2018 to November 40, 2020 to provide the project coordinating services at a contract price of EC 2.08 million. ECMS was further retained by contract agreement dated December 1st, 2020 to May 30th, 2023 at an additional contract price of 1.98 million. The firm of Amicus Legal, which was retained as SLASPA's external counsel, was paid an additional 1.689 million for vetting of the loan agreements relating to the project. The original site for the new terminal was north of the existing terminal. However, the existing project site is further northwest and appears to be premised on integration of the Desert Star Holding DSH racetrack and a new seaport development. The new terminal will therefore be accessible from the Larissus Road, thereby requiring road construction, which was outside the scope of the OECC. The project is expected to be executed in 5 packages. Foundation package, the shell plus the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection, MEPF package, the interior package, the landslide package, and the airside package. The effective project start date was September 11, 2020, with a planned duration of 30 months. Construction commenced on November 23, 2020. Considering an initial budgeted project cost of US 175 million or EC 472.5 million, the then administration secured loan financing from the Exim Bank of Taiwan of US 100 million in 2018 and from a consortium of commercial banks of US 75 million in 2020. Additionally, the World Bank loan financing of US 45 million or EC 121.5 million was contracted in May 2020 for airfield projects. Separate and apart from the HIA terminal building and the World Bank component, there are enabling works and other master plan projects related to HIA. The full costing and financing information for those are not yet available to the committee. Consequently, the total cost to the government of the entire HIA capital improvement program remains unclear. Based on the information and documentation presented, the committee found some critical contractual and administrative issues, such as the absence of a peer review and structured project dossier for the project. The project was not comprehensively appraised at its commencement. The contract price for the project is not fixed and was based on preliminary rather than detailed designs. Sole source procurement was adopted rather than competitive procurement of architectural and engineering as well as contractor services. The prevailing administrative and contractual issues exposed SLASPA and the GOSL to significant risk, particularly project cost escalation. The expenditure to date is approximately 31.8 million or EC 85.86 million. In fact, the contractors claim that the likely cost overruns up to the shell phase of the project will be approximately 113.4 million. Under the rough order of magnitude scenarios, ROM, a continuation of the project under its current track can cause the project cost to range between US 220 million or 5% of GDP to US 245 million or 5.6% of GDP. A worsening of project execution from its current track can cause the project to end up costing approximately 400 million US dollars. 400 million US dollars. Or 9.1% of GDP, a little more than double the initial ROM costing of US 1.75 million or 4% of GDP. The realization of any one of these scenarios can potentially push up the country's debt to GDP ratio. The project is behind schedule. The rate of project analysis indicates that the project is delayed by 9 months as of September 2021. Project delays are due to factors relating to the impact of COVID-19 and an ongoing impasse between CBR, HEERY, and OECC on the Phase 2 Shell package. Should the existing impasse with the Shell package remain protracted, the project risks encountering disruption costs, including those relating to arbitration and litigation as specified in the contract. Further, poorly written contracts, namely those for CBRE, HEERY, and ECMS and OECC, blow critical roles and responsibilities, especially those for project management. It can be concluded that the interests of the taxpayers of St. Lucia have not been adequately protected. The government who has guaranteed the project, and SLASPA has also provided the contractor with a guarantee to cover cost overruns with no limits for the construction of the project. This is dangerous, and if allowed to continue, can potentially result in a financial predicament for SLASPA, as the project cost can increase by more than 100%. The 5 options proposed for review are: 1. Do nothing, complete the terminal using the current design and determine the overall cost. 2. Scale down the existing design to obtain a single structure by removing components including the elevated roadway and food floor with VIP lounges. 3. Use a design from 2020 with construction of the terminal in the car park north of the existing terminal and demolition of the existing terminal. 4. Keep the existing terminal and incorporate it into the expansion. Create a connector and use the existing terminal for arrivals and the new scale down along the vertical plane terminal for departures, leaving room for further expansion if required. Piling for that phase would have already been in place. 5. Determine what could be salvaged from the ongoing foundation works and relocate the new terminal further towards the east. The government awaits the final report of the committee, but in the meantime will include and pursue the identification of various value engineering options to ensure that the money of the taxpayers of St. Lucia was not squandered. Constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, government is committed to constitutional reform. We have signaled our good governance intentions by the appointment of a Deputy Speaker. We have in the first 100 days reignited the Constitutional Reform Commission, presented to Parliament in a motion debated in August 2015. On assuming office, the government recognizing that since the approval of the resolution by Parliament in 2015 for the establishment of the committee, little progress had been made in this important matter. We have taken steps to pursue the constitutional reform recommendations as a matter of high national priority. In fulfillment of this objective, government will work with and take the necessary steps in consultation with you, Mr. Speaker, and the Leader of the Opposition to ensure that this matter is adequately pursued. Government will take the necessary steps to make available to the Parliamentary Committee the requisite consultancy and technical assistance required in pursuit of its mandate and terms of reference. It is our aim that changes in the Constitution of St. Lucia will be effected fully or in part during this electoral term. Mr. Speaker, during this 100 days, we have passed the following. The Consumer Protection Act. This piece of legislation will streamline the administrative aspects and the Consumer Protection Act amendment. This piece of legislation will streamline the administrative aspects and processes relating to consumer protection complaints and the resulting investigations and hearings. The COVID-19 Prevention and Control Amendment Number 2 Act. The Amendment Number 2 Act amended the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Act Number 9 of 2020. The aim of the act is to regulate the containment of the spread of COVID-19 in the interest of public safety, public order, and public health. It had been in force since 2nd October 2020. Among other things, the new act made COVID-19 breaches ticketable offenses, thus reducing exposure of the members of the St. Lucia Police Force to COVID-19. Criminal Records Rehabilitation Offenders Amendment Act. 2 new sections were added, one of which were the records of persons who have been convicted of offenses under the COVID-19 Prevention Control Act number 9 of 2020, and simple possession of cannabis or cannabis resin that is 30 grams or less under the Drugs Prevention and Misuse Act, Cap 3.02, may be expunged through exemption by the minister. The Drugs Prevention of Misuse Amendment Act, number 14 of 2021. The Act decriminalizes small quantities of cannabis by allowing the possession of up to 30 grams of cannabis for personal use. The Minister of Health will sign the Drug Prevention of Misuse Cannabis Cultivation Regulations, which will make provision for the cultivation of not more than 4 cannabis plants at a time by a person at his dwelling house. I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, that in spite of all the financial constraints, we have managed to meet some significant commitments made to the people by the St. Lucia Labour Party election manifesto. Meeting these commitments meant changing the priorities of government by putting the people first. This simple but profound philosophical shift has brought much relief to parents and households across the country and will continue to bring much more in the coming days, weeks, and months of this Labour administration. My ministerial colleagues will detail some of the initiatives which we have undertaken in bringing much needed relief to the people of St. Lucia. As we move past this milestone of 100 days, my government will satisfy its election promises to put the people of St. Lucia first. There are many investors keen to do business in St. Lucia because of the openness and trust that they have found in this St. Lucia Labour Party administration. I call on the St. Lucian public to be patient. We are in government to work in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. The times are challenging, but there is reason for optimism. Our tourism sector is on the up. Businesses are beginning to return to some normality. Investors are showing greater interest in St. Lucia. There are some major capital infrastructure works being planned. The COVID situation, according to the health authorities, is trending well. I look forward to continuously update you on the progress we have been making as a government which cares and puts the people of St. Lucia first. Meanwhile, we will continue to work in the interest of the people of St. Lucia. I want to thank members of the private and public sector, the unions, the protective services, the civil servants, the NGOs, the churches, for their understanding and willingness to dialogue with government. We are truly grateful. We pledge to govern with fairness, equity, dialogue, accountability. The future is challenging, but the prospects are encouraging as we seek to rebuild our country from the pandemic and the disastrous policies of the former government. I thank you.
Minister for Youth and Sport.
It's an 100 today.
Minister, before you commence, I just want to remind ministers who are making statements to make those statements available to the office.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to make an official statement to this honorable House on my activities within my ministry and indeed my constituency of Grosley during my first 100 days of being sworn into this august chamber. But before I do this, allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate St. Lucia's men 3x3 basketball team. As you know, who made all of us proud as they defeated Argentina to book their spot in the quarterfinal of the FIBA American Basketball Tournament. The likes of Troy Louison, Marcian Coljan, Keegan Breville, and Shamaja Baptiste must be commended for their hard work and exploits during this challenging time. Congratulations also goes out to our young athletes selected to wear St. Lucia's colors at the Junior Pan American Games scheduled for Colombia next week. Congratulations to Ryan Theodore, Alistair Theodore, Carrick George, and Clitterson Leon participating in male basketball. Maya George, Petal Brand, Kalia Stevens, and Romani Lewis Emmanuel participating in female basketball. Jayan Odlem Smith, Deandre Blanchard, Naima Hazel, and Michaeli Shalman in swimming. Luke Chevrier for sailing, and of course, Jabuzili Michael Joseph in track and field. Mr. Speaker, on October 31st, 2021, I received an official letter from Babuno native Laverne Spencer informing me and the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports that after 23 consecutive years of national representation, she had decided to officially retire. Mr. Speaker, Laverne Spencer has been an example to all St. Lucians, and her achievements must never be forgotten by this and following generations. As such, the Ministry of Sports, along with the Cabinet of Ministers, will continue discussions on how best to honor this legend during our next independence celebration. Now, Mr. Speaker, when the election results were read on July 26, 2021, I knew in my heart and mind that the youth of St. Lucia was displeased with the previous government. But my eyes were truly opened to why, as I assumed the role of Minister for Youth Development and Sports. Mr. Speaker, during the first 100 days in my ministry, I found a number of facilities such as the Grosley playing field with bills in excess of $180,000 owed to Lucelect and therefore disconnected by this company. As a result, no development program could be instituted for our young people after hours. Mr. Speaker, I visited playing facilities under the National Sports Infrastructure Program, NSIP. $32 million to Lockerbie, 4 former national athletes in the cabinet, and the largest amount of money spent by a government in our nation's history still did not yield the sports progress that was promised. Mr. Speaker, very early on, I was furnished with information and updates regarding the National Sports Academy, where again millions of taxpayer dollars were spent in the name of sports development. Yet not one student has graduated with a certificate in a sports field that they can use anywhere in the region and in the world. In addition to this, I found a program set aside for our athletes who are the cream of the crop, broken with inefficacies that led to confusion on the actual implementation of this elite and burgeoning athlete program. As a result, Mr. Speaker, in my first 100 days, I recommended to the Cabinet of Ministers that we amend the elite athlete program to ensure that a properly constituted team of competent individuals assessed and made recommendations for which athletes are given the extra attention that is needed for their development. We included as part of a selection committee, amongst others, a representative from a national association so as to remove the influence of a politician on the selection of who is an elite or burgeoning athlete. In an effort to deal with the issues of playing fields being inadequately maintained and managed, and electrical bills being so exorbitant that they are cut off by Lucia, this government has put together a group of sports-minded persons born and bred in St. Lucia to put together once and for all a facilities management policy. Mr. Speaker, instead of the ad hoc manner in which a playing field is managed and maintained in one way, and another playing facility a mile away is managed in another way, this policy will be a legal guide for how all playing fields across the island is managed. Mr. Speaker, after deep thought, evaluation, and research, within my first 100 days, I have written and recommended for approval from the Cabinet of Ministers to replace the St. Lucia Sports Academy with a sports development and administrative village. You see, Mr. Speaker, we are in the scientific age. And while a number of other small islands have embraced the scientific approach to sports, St. Lucia continues to lag behind, and it has allowed a number of our talented athletes to either fall prey to injury or lack the scientific information, the physiological information to ensure progress. As such, Mr. Speaker, the vision is to ensure that this facility continues to have a teaching component. But with this teaching components, athletes are connected with certified online programs, including the sports nutrition fields, the physical fitness fields, and the opportunities will also be provided to collaborate with regional and international bodies such as the Cricket West Indies to become certified coaches. The facility, Mr. Speaker, is expected to include a sports science lab. This will ensure that athletes' weight, their height, their hemoglobin levels, the biomechanical movements, and injuries are evaluated. The mental aspect of sports will also be given attention. With the establishment of a sports psychologist, it will ensure that athletes are evaluated before and after competition. Mr. Speaker, this village will also be a high-performance center to provide suitable training programs and facilities to our elite athletes. Sports administration is another important aspect of our development. As such, for the first time in our nation's history, sporting federations and associations can also be given their secretariats from which their day-to-day operations can be managed. Mr. Speaker, there are other aspects of this village that our athletes can look forward to, including the engagement with sports nutritionists, and of course include camping rooms for national teams and organizations ahead of competitions, and so much more. Now, Mr. Speaker, within my first 100 days as a minister, I saw all sorts of pretty playing fields that were badly constructed and dangerous to our people's health. As my mom would say, Belflare Salode. Yet the promise of a national aquatic center remained unfulfilled. Despite the fact that St. Lucia is down to host 2 major regional and international swimming championships, nothing was left in the kitty to build the stadium. After abusing the National Lottery's finances, there was no money left to get a stadium off the ground. But after much negotiation of efforts with the newly instituted Lotteries Board, clearing of space next to the Beauséjour indoor facility has commenced, signaling the commencement of the St. Lucia National Aquatic Center within this government's first 100 days. Mr. Speaker, lighting of facilities is an important aspect of our nation's sports and indeed social development. Getting young people off the streets after hours in meaningful programs goes a long way with dealing with some of the psychosocial issues within our communities, including crime. As such, in our first 100 days, our government has ensured that lights that have been secured are mounted on the Lakai Court. After years of begging, the Bonte community, which produces some of the best basketballers on island, finally saw commencement of a lighting program on their court within our first 100 days. And of course, two of the players doing very well for St. Lucia play on this court. After years of begging and seeing organizations and persons from all over St. Lucia using their facilities for development programs, lights have been secured for the Corinth playing field. Mr. Speaker, after experiencing 5 years of neglect due to a Belrose doctrine, the community of Bocage has seen the erection of lights on their playing fields in less than 100 days. Mr. Speaker, in the first 100 days of being in government, I felt it was very important to have a meeting with the National Youth Council. As a result, on Friday, 10 September 2021, I, along with the Director of Youth, was given an official tour of the National Youth Council's Secretariat. Immediately after, I profited the opportunity to hear from the Council what some of their main challenges were. As a result, the Ministry has gone back to the drawing board to ensure that deeper ties are fostered with this organization going forward. Mr. Speaker, the first 100 days have been challenging for my ministry. With the safety requirements being what it is as a result of COVID-19, our youth workers have gone to work on sensitizing our nation's youth on the importance of following the protocols. And from all indications, they are happy with a government that has allowed for new legislation that has discontinued the abuse of young people in our communities for not wearing their mask. Yet the biggest issue facing our young people continues to be unemployment. As a result, we at the ministry have embarked on the establishment of a database of the unemployed in this country, while developing a modern method to link the employers with prospective employees. Therefore, the Youth Department has established an additional feature which is hoped to be an addendum to the Government of St. Lucia's webpage. Skilled 758 gives persons in the various communities with talent, skills, and capabilities the opportunity to upload their resume and curriculum vitae on the government portal. This will provide the Government of St. Lucia with a list of skilled and unemployed people which can be filtered to identify the areas of their capabilities on the island, along with their geographical location of these unemployed persons. This will then allow all of St. Lucia in a particular location in need of a particular skill at a particular time to go onto the web page and gain access to someone who is unemployed to provide needed service to them at that time. Mr. Speaker, in the first 100 days, this web portal has been developed, and we are currently presenting this website to various stakeholders, including the Chamber of Commerce, for further review. Mr. Speaker, when I went around the constituency of Grosley prior to the election of July 26, I saw and felt the level of neglect experienced by certain groups. I saw and experienced the neglect to certain constituents and communities. I saw and felt the level of neglect experienced by the committed men and women working at the Grosley police station. I visited the dilapidated police station before the election, but was not given a full tour of the facility at that time. Within the first 100 days, I made it my duty to book a full tour of the facility. And Mr. Speaker, what I saw there was truly heartbreaking. I listened with horror as I found out that the Grosley police station did not have a vehicle to respond to the various criminal activities in the island's most populous constituency, housing the most opulent individuals. Mr. Speaker, I made it my duty to make a presentation, make representation for these individuals at my next sitting of cabinet. My cabinet members were truly horrified. An Honorable Prime Minister and member for Castries East ensured that we were able to secure a brand new vehicle for the Grocery Police Station within our first 100 days. The community of Deramo also suffered a high level of neglect. Though begging for the road to be fixed, these individuals from a working class community were asked to come up with the money to fix their road, while roads were resurfaced in other areas that required little intervention. In my first 100 days, I ensured that the residents of Deramo not only saw their representative frequently, but their road was given the necessary attention required. The Deramo Court and Plain area were also neglected. So in our first 100 days, I ensured that new lights were installed on the court and the adjoining plain surface was rehabilitated. Mr. Speaker, the community of Piat was also neglected for a while. While roads were being built all around them, evidence of neglect went unchecked for months. In light of this, intervention was implemented to ensure that the road remained motorable in the first 100 days. There were also a number of dark spots that were provided with lights as residents expressed their fears of living in those areas. Mr. Speaker, during our first 100 days, we ensured that roads were built in areas that absolutely needed it. The community of Corinth was pleading for some intervention, and so a new road was constructed in this community. With no names given to those roads as yet, I am relegated to describing this road as the one leading to Richard Frederick's house. I was told by community residents that they would not get in the road because the member for Castries Central was at that time seeking election. The same can be said for Marishill. The road next to the old Sunset Motors building has been needed. The road has been needed for a while. And so we have commenced this project within our first 100 days. Mr. Speaker, by now everyone in the constituency of Groseley knows that as a young national athlete from the Groseley constituency, I did not have all the means to get basic gear and sometimes basic necessities such as roll-on, new underwear, toothpaste, etc. for travel. I remember well that it was the likes of Clarence Rambali who purchased my football boots for me ahead of representing St. Lucia. Joe Hall, Ricky McDoom, John Eugene, Alton and Kent Crafton, Frankie Gustav and the rest of the Groseley senior cricket team patched up in support of me before national duty. As such, since being the parliamentary representative for Groseley, I have ensured that every young person who has been selected for the St. Lucia national team gets support for their MP. And Mr. Speaker, I will continue to do this after I'm elected again and again and again and again by my people. Right, Sean? Mr. Speaker, education is perhaps one of the most important aspects of the development of my community. With this in mind, we distributed e-learning devices to over 200 students in the Groseley constituency in the first 100 days. In addition to this, after begging corporate Groseley, we distributed back-to-school supplies including bags, books, uniforms, and more to over 500 children. Mr. Speaker, the health of our community is also of great importance to me as MP. As a result, within my first 100 days, I visited the Moshi and Granivier health centers to complete a needs assessment for these facilities. The following week, accompanied by the Minister of Health, we visited the Groseley Polyclinic and provided the impetus for the refurbishment of the X-ray machine. Thank you, Honorable Member. Mr. Speaker, we continue to lobby on behalf of the staff of all three health-related facilities in Groseley, as upgrades in their facilities will ensure they continue to provide wonderful service to the residents. So, Mr. Speaker, this 100-day period had to be the most difficult commencement period for any government in St. Lucia's history. We saw the highest amount of spending in our nation's history by the previous government ahead of the last general election. As a result, we inherited the worst fiscal situation this nation has ever seen. We have had to deal with the most deadly wave of the coronavirus immediately after being elected. No government in our nation's history has ever inherited such a phenomenon. But Mr. Speaker, this new Labour Party government may have to spend 15 years in government before we are able to receive the amounts of financing the previous government squandered in just their 5 years. But with the little that we've had, with the little we've received so far, we have shown a clear intention to be fiscally prudent. Mr. Speaker, with the little we've received so far, we have ensured that the health and education of our nation is given the support and attention it requires. Mr. Speaker, as you will hear from other members of this government, we'll continue to work hard as we continue to put the people first. I thank you.
Well done, comrade.
Minister for Equity.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, parliamentarians, good morning. The last year of life with COVID-19 pandemic has been very challenging on many levels. During this period, on a global scale, we've watched health systems of the nation struggle. We have watched large economies shut down. We have watched soaring unemployment. Mr. Speaker, in the Oasis and St. Lucia, of course, the situation has been no different. A bleak economic performance which has exacerbated social problems, placed considerable strain on the health system, and dealt a hard-hitting blow to vulnerable populations. Mr. Speaker, permit me to take leave at this time as I speak to the deaths we have encountered in St. Lucia as a result of COVID. Mr. Speaker, we've had persons coming to St. Lucia from Dominica, and for some health reason, and they've lost their loved ones. They have persons who have lost young ones, Mr. Speaker. And this morning, I grieve with this Dominican lady who came here just to bury her 20-year-old who got stabbed in Agard some 2 months ago. Mr. Speaker, as I reflect on what she came here to do, I couldn't help but, as the Ministry of Equity, support her in facilitating the burial because she's not able to do this. She is a struggling person from Dominica. As well as, Mr. Speaker,
my cousin came only on Sunday, hoping to see her stepfather, but in the process of arranging to see her stepfather, within 1 week she lost her mother and biological father within 1 week, and she's here to bury her father and mother. Marie, I do sympathize with you. And of course, my Auntie Madeleine succumbed to some illness, and of course I know my family up in Therefore in the constituency are mourning the loss of almost 3 family members at once. So I beg and I take leave, as I did seek discussion with the Prime Minister, but through you, Mr. Speaker, I would wish if we would take a moment of silence for so many families in St. Lucia who have lost loved ones during this COVID period. Minister, if you would allow, just for a moment of silence, and I would ask members to stand with me just for a moment. Thank you. Thank you so graciously, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. In response to this crisis, our government have implemented several measures to contain the spread of the virus, to bring relief to vulnerable families, and to foster recovery of our economy. And so in St. Lucia, as we continue to implement measures to combat the current pandemic and deal with the consequences of economic contraction, we also continue to focus on the implementation of appropriate responses to the existing and emerging social issues. Such focus, Mr. Speaker, is in keeping with our vision of an inclusive society and our philosophy of putting people first. Today, Mr. Speaker, as Minister responsible for equity, social justice, and empowerment, I will share with you in this honorable House, as well as the general public through you, the range of completed and ongoing interventions implemented through my ministry, as well as through constituency arrangements to provide immediate relief and assistance to our people and to build resilience of our population. The following, therefore, constitute some of the key achievements during this first 100 days in office. I will start with achievement at a ministerial level, and for ease of understanding, Mr. Speaker, these will be presented in 2 categories, namely the administrative matters and projects and programs. Administrative matters. Engagement with heads of department for policy dialogue. Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that a common vision supported by collective action is powerful in advancing projects and programs towards successful outcomes. Consequently, upon assuming office, Mr. Speaker, as an early activity, I met with heads of department and key stakeholders to articulate the policy direction of the government of St. Lucia relevant to the mandate of the ministry. Mr. Speaker, I wish to note that upon taking this office, the Ministry of Equity, the only thing that was changed, Mr. Speaker, is a chair that I met there that was not suitable for the minister and a clock on the wall. But everything I met in the ministry and everyone is still there. Mr. Speaker, this dialogue was intended to foster a common understanding of the alignment of government policy with the strategic priorities of the ministry, and I am confident that this conversation, as well as others to come, will positively impact the ministry's programming to the benefit of the beneficiary groups and others. Mr. Speaker, I need to speak on the matter of the elder care. Mr. Speaker, as an administrative matter, we met 448 persons providing care to the elderly. There were 18 supervisors and 484 persons providing care. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform you that we had to embark on structural change to improve the welfare of those receiving the care. And whereas some persons are asking of changes, I need to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that out of 486 persons in total, because we added 2, 83 persons were changed to facilitate the better care of individuals, and out of 18 supervisors, only 3 persons were changed. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report to this Honorable House that 17% of the total persons involved in providing elder care were changed to facilitate better care for those receiving it. I'll give an example, Mr. Speaker. If somebody is visually impaired, how can they care for somebody? If they cannot identify and read the medication prescription, how can they provide the care to individuals? There are some persons with mobility problems. How can those persons move to a home to provide care? And that's the only reason why those changes were made. And please note, like I said, 17% only. So out of 486 persons providing care, 83 persons would change. And out of 18 supervisors, only 3 supervisors would change. Everybody else found working in the elder care are still at work. On the administrative matters, review of reinstatement of all boards under the purview of the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Empowerment. Mr. Speaker, there are 3 agencies under the direct purview of the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Empowerment with boards of directors, and these are the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, the James Belgrave Bell Fund, and the National Conservation Authority, NCA. However, in setting into office, I realized that in some cases, chairpersons and board members had already tendered their resignation, rendering those boards to be non-functional. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, within the first few weeks in office, these oversight bodies were reorganized and reinstated to continue delivering on their respective mandates. In fact, the NCA and SSDF board have met and have commenced critical discussions relevant to these organizations. Conduct a comprehensive review of the operations of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, and of course, one would have heard previously in this House when I reported that during the last 10 days before election, $650,000 were expended at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, for which no report can be made or has been made available at this time. Mr. Speaker, the core mandate of the SSDF is to ensure the delivery of basic services to disadvantaged and marginalized communities in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I spent 15 years in another life with the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, and I know that too well. In keeping with this mandate, the SSDF has successfully administered several social assistance programs throughout the island. Notwithstanding, given the complexity of the external as well as internal environment, and in keeping with good practices, it is important that the agency assesses its operations periodically and to modify or implement measures as necessary for improvement of operations. As such, the comprehensive assessment seeks to review, evaluate the current operations of the SSDF towards identification of concrete recommendations for improved operations of the fund. Mr. Speaker, this activity, which commenced on September 6, 2021, will be completed in January 2022, and thereby a decision will be made on the implementation of the recommendation and actions. Rationalization of office space. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Equity has several offices in various locations around the island. Cognizant to existing fiscal challenges and taking other issues into consideration, the ministry has commenced a process of rationalizing of office space towards efficient and optimal utilization of space. This process is also expected to redound to improve service delivery as clusters of similar social protection services may now be accessible in a single point. Mr. Speaker, just by way of example, we have identified a single movement of one agency, and that would lead to savings of $500,000 annually. Mr. Speaker, just by way of example, I repeat, we've identified one agency that needs to be relocated because of wasteful space, and we will save $43,000 monthly, or approximately $500,000 annually.
Where are they at Colony House?
I will not speak to the location at this time. Mr. Speaker, can I speak to the Boys Training Center? Mr. Speaker, justifiably or unjustifiably, the Boys Training Center has been the focus of intermittent media attention for some time. In light of this, and given the ministry's commitment to the existence of an environment conducive to rehabilitation, the ministry is in the process of revisiting the operations of the Boys Training Center towards restructuring and reprogramming for overall improvement. In the immediate, the legal and policy framework which supports the center operations will be reviewed and updated as necessary. Operational processes will be enhanced and staffing arrangement will be reviewed and deficiencies will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, this government, on the principle of putting people first, we are putting the young wards who are in the care of the state, we are putting them first. Mr. Speaker, much is being discussed in the media, but this government will not tolerate abuse of any kind towards the wards at the Boys Training Center. While we are sensitive and will ensure that the working environment for the staff is good, but we will focus on getting persons with the right character, the specific potential and competences so that they can serve the Boys Training Center well. We will put the young men first, and the ministry will also engage, or we have engaged last week, the Caribbean Development Bank with respect to the relocation of the Boys Training Center, as well as revamping the programs that we are offering. Initial talks, which took place in 2020, which were deferred as a result of COVID-19, will be back. And as the CDB has indicated, we will consider all other options, including repurposing of a school for the Boys Training Center, which is a lot cheaper than constructing a very large building as what obtains currently. And now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn my attention to some of the core programs at the ministry level. The implementation of an educational access program for students in need of educational assistance. Mr. Speaker, from my vantage point, as the Minister of Equity, I can speak with much accuracy of the critical need for providing support to households to meet educational needs of the children. As anticipated, job losses as a result of COVID has negatively impacted the fiscal space of households and significantly reduced the ability to provide for some of the basic needs. This is most evident in the number of requests for various forms of assistance presented to the ministry and to the SSDF by households in need. The Education Access Program therefore presented a key social assistance intervention for vulnerable households within 17 constituencies. A total of $1.8 million was allocated to this program, and to date, approximately 2,500 households, or approximately 5,000 children, have benefited from this effort. Assistance ranged from the provision of uniform, including shoes, books, and even the procurement of learning devices. Implementation of the Education Access Program was effected during the period of July to August 2021 and was administered by the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, whilst I have heard the argument that this is not an entirely new program, I think the focus is on what has been achieved during the first 100 days in office. And in that regard, I want to make it clear that this government, the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party, mobilized the necessary resources and implemented this program in an effort to address the needs of the most vulnerable among us. Implementation of the Hurricane Elsa Recovery Program. Mr. Speaker, the Hurricane Elsa Recovery Program was designed to provide assistance to needy person families whose homes were impacted by Hurricane Elsa July 2nd, 2021. $3 million Eastern Caribbean dollars was allocated for this program, which was implemented by the ministry with technical support from the St. Lucia Social Development Fund and the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. Though originally planned to be implemented in July 2021, the program was redesigned after this government took office to ensure greater efficiency, more effective targeting, and smooth implementation. Mr. Speaker, as part of the process and for accountability purposes, technical teams were deployed to assess or verify damaged households and to document the same via photographs. The technical teams were also responsible for determining the materials needed for eligible households. For improved resilience to the beneficiary household, the standard and guiding the implementation of the hurricane program, we focus on improving the building codes. We spoke to roof pitch being increased from 20 to 25 degrees, Mr. Speaker, rafters being placed at no more than 2 feet apart, and to include hurricane straps at the feet of those rafters. Mr. Speaker, it is expectation that the renovation of these homes under this program will be more resilient. And in future disasters, and the beneficiaries of these households will not have the need to revisit the ministry for such assistance. Mr. Speaker, this is an important program and was implemented during the period August to October 2021. A total of 322 households or 130 persons who benefited from this ELSA program. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of income support programs for bus operators and licensed bar owners. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that licensed bar owners and minibus operators have been hard hit by the pandemic, with some bars being closed for weeks, while bus operators saw their passenger loads reduced to half owing to COVID protocols. Noting the financial implications of these actions, the kind-hearted Honorable Prime Minister has committed to an announced an income support program for this group of individuals. And this is to be implemented through my ministry. I am happy to report in-house preparatory arrangements have commenced and that this program will be rolled out in December. Mr. Speaker, kitmwe diyan Creole, se moun ki ni se kabawea ek se minibus drivers la en décembre kay trope si pour parce que Premier ministre la wè nécessaire ek ni an tche côté kay bay se moun sa la taxi pour parce que nous savions souffrir au chay. Development of project proposals for submission to the CDP to support social protection programs. Mr. Speaker, the delivery of social protection programs is at the core of the ministry's mandate. Identified as one of the most effective instruments that can be leveraged to respond to the impact of shocks, existing social protection programs under the purview of my ministry have been and continues to be used effectively to support the poor and vulnerable. And of course, we can speak of the welfare program where people are receiving support, as well as some of the programs at the Hope, could most certainly see at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund. Therefore, recognizing the need for continued support to this target group, given the prolonged existence of COVID-19, the ministry has developed 2 new project proposals for submission to the Caribbean Development Fund, to the Caribbean Development Bank, seeking funding for implementation of the following programs. A COVID response program with the following components. 1, income support programs for persons who've lost their jobs and means of livelihood as a result of COVID. 2, provision for social assistance grant to eligible households on public assistance program and a child disability grant for persons on the waiting list. Vertical expansion of the social assistance program for persons living with HIV, feeding program for the homeless, and support for learning continuity in vulnerable populations. The second one is a social resilience program which is expected to contribute to strengthening the resilience of vulnerable population. This project has the following components. 1, support for micro-entrepreneurship activities, digitization of cash transfer payment system, psychosocial support for social workers, and the implementation of work-enriched programs. In both cases, those projects is expected by December 21st, with the implementation to commence shortly after. And let me roll to what I consider Castries Southeast, or work in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, I have commissioned a review of several projects in the constituency of Castries Southeast. Not with a view of stopping these projects, but rather to ensure that these projects receive appropriate level of community consultation, that they meet community needs. These projects are 1, a container market on the Bexar Highway, the Odsa HRDC, Bexar HRDC or indoor facility, and a Wavin Pastor musical studio. Mr. Speaker, these findings will be reviewed and will be communicated, and there will be consultation on the way forward. Mr. Speaker, it's worth noting that the Forestier HRDC was stopped by the contractor, and I have not mentioned, but the intention is not to exclude the review of the HRDC for Forestier. But to note, Mr. Speaker, with just preliminary information that the container market was not approved by the Planning Department or DCA, the Odsa HRDC have incurred a total of $374,000 in cost overruns. The Bexar HRDC, still in the ground, have incurred $380,000 in cost overruns. The Wavin Pastor musical studio, the community said they never asked for this, they needed something else. So the intention is not to change the contractors or not to stop the project, but to review with the view of ensuring that we get value for money and that these projects do well for the community. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence in allowing me to mention a few of the more ongoing or completed projects within Castries Southeast constituency. Renovation of the Cronglands Community Center, which was abandoned. Review of abandoned existing community centers in Bele, Badney, and Cul-de-sac. We are reviewing, we have gotten drawings so that we bring these projects back to life in the community. Mr. Speaker, it's important as a ministry that we understand the value of people meeting. This government will not embark on constructing extravagant community centers or HRDCs that cannot be maintained, while those that are small in the same communities are abandoned and allowed to rot. It makes no sense, Mr. Speaker, that the GIS shed that has been converted into a community center in cul-de-sac, that is still being used today with chicken wire on the outside, after so many years of service, that's providing room to raise funds when somebody has cancer, to be the place where you have after school in the community of cul-de-sac, is allowed to remain unrenovated without a coat of paint, but go next door and build an HRDC in Odsa for $3.6 million without the capacity to maintain. The Ministry of Equity will investigate, but make use of the resources so that we can not just construct capacities for communities to meet, but to ensure that we can maintain those that we build. Mr. Speaker, review of playgrounds. Mr. Speaker, I was told the playing field in Forestier, built with millions of dollars, is not being maintained. Someone told me that they saw a vehicle somebody learning how to drive on the playing field with some of the most expensive drains. There's another playground that the young people use, but I don't know, for some reason or the other, they have not gotten to using this massive playground that is built. But in Tuapito, in Bele, there are small playgrounds, not the size of a playing field, where hundreds of young men congregate every day to recreate is left unattended. It would take $100 just to prepare it, but that has been ignored for years. Mr. Speaker, this parliamentary representative will give consideration to every recreational space in Castries Southeast. And as such, I have constructed 4 pairs of small goals and have deployed them in some of those playgrounds, and they have been well received, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's not how big the gifts are, but how appropriate and relevant they are. So the small goals have gone. Mr. Speaker, I have seen hundreds of persons in Castries Southeast on Constituency Day, but I've met 4 young persons with micro-enterprise spirit. The agenda is to convert this small business and make it successful. So a young man came to me with regards to his tartar sauce, and I was pleased to support him. The young lady who came with a cheesecake using Oreo cookies, I supported with a grant. And of course, those with the hairstyling business, to give a small grant to provide them with the tool to put to the hair dryer system, they receive a grant for this. We have supported small micro-enterprise, and I've encouraged the people in Castries Southeast to come on board with micro-enterprise initiatives I will support. Mr. Speaker, we do have approximately 38 communities in Castries Southeast, it being the second largest constituency with so many hamlets and settlements. It is difficult to visit everyone at once, but I love the people of Castries Southeast, and I've made it my business to engineer the way forward in ensuring that they get representation. And as such, Mr. Speaker, every Wednesday, I have made it my business to be in the community or in the constituency, and on Fridays, I find myself in the constituency office. Mr. Speaker, I wish to advise that every person associated legally or constitutionally with the constituency is part of a management information system that has allowed us to function. The Social Transformation Officer, Ms. Antonia Rennie, the youth workers, Nixon Barry, Joshua Howell, Kenya Barthelmy, Nazan Hutchinson, the secretary in my constituency office, Melissa Raymond, Ms. Tench at the ministry, as well as every other council officers are part of a booklet that will be disseminated with their phone numbers, their email addresses, so that if persons can't find me, they can route information through these individuals to get to me. Mr. Speaker, I've asked for patience from Castries Southeast. I will see them and I will do due diligence to ensure that they are served. But as I embark on this journey together with my colleagues, I want to thank, first of all, the ministry staff that have embraced me, the permanent secretary. They have made the work light for me that I've been able to navigate. And my colleague ministers, and the most, and I dare say, kind-hearted leader that every time I call him, whether it's night or day, he takes my call and he carries a heart for poor people. I wish to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an ear as we move forward in putting our people first, but as we take every step to save lives, because if you do not have people, you don't need a government. So I ask all those hearing or listening this afternoon to please do not be hesitant about being vaccinated. Do not be hesitant about taking steps to protect yourself and protect your family, because we are losing quite a number of persons through this pandemic. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for the Public Service.
And more. And so on.
Huh? Yes, madam. I think you're a little too far. Mr. Speaker, let me take leave to make just a few comments from my statements. I have a very famous quote I use when I address an audience, and as I speak to this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, and the people of St. Lucia, I will quote, "I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good thing, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any fellow human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." So when I stand in this house, I stand to give my best, and that is what the people have entrusted me to do. I also quote that I have done so much with so little that I can do anything with nothing. Mr. Speaker, today I stand here as the only woman in the House, and I make an apology for my sister, Minister of Commerce, who has informed me that she is unable to be here, and she expects me to hold the fort. But I'm not alone, because in this House, and with my cabinet colleagues, I am very confident that they are gender sensitive, and I have nothing to fear about. Today, I rise in this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, in a very unique position. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I have no fear. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that I am the lone woman in the House, I am fortunate to be surrounded by men of integrity who remain resolute to serve and represent the people of St. Lucia with distinction. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to make my presentation to give an account of my stewardship after 100 days. Mr. Speaker, I had promised not to seek the people's vote and then abandon them and travel overseas and return after 100 days. Never, never, never. I will not do this to my people in Babono and St. Lucia. This is heart-wrenching. Ma pa feka imadesha Babono pour vote yo. Ek ay parti. Ek ay vire après yo 100 jours. Jamais ma kay fait ça. Ça c'est un question. Mr. Speaker, let me thank the Prime Minister for his confidence in me to assign me the Ministry of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs. I will not disappoint him. I will not disappoint the people of St. Lucia, and I will not disappoint the people in Babylon. The Ministry of the Public Service is the heartbeat of the government. You enter and you exit through the public service. And the Prime Minister and my colleagues are very much aware of that, and therefore they are giving me the full cooperation to get the wheel to turn. Mr. Speaker, the public service is a ministry where I told my team that their responsibility is to serve the public. They must do it respectfully, in an efficient and effective manner on a daily basis. What I have done in the ministry from the start as minister, I immediately brought in Labor and Gender Affairs under the direct stewardship of the Permanent Secretary in the Department of the Public Service. And we are very pleased that the departments that have always been treated as appendices to ministries, now they find themselves in center focus. Mr. Speaker, we have also decided to introduce a new unit under my watch. And this unit will address youth at risk. Our young people have been treated in a way where services to them are in all pockets, all corners. And the Prime Minister has decided that under my watch, we need to formulate a unit to address the situation of young people in a holistic way. This is the first time the government is establishing this unit. And I have had discussion with the Department of Probation and Parole under the Department of Home Affairs, and they are ready to form a committee to address that matter. We do not want our young people following or falling by the wayside. Mr. Speaker, all of us are aware that we are in a very precarious situation with COVID-19. And it has not made life easier for public servants and other agencies of government, businesses, and the citizens of St. Lucia. In combating COVID-19 virus, we are aware that many persons have been speaking of their rights in relation to vaccination. But they must also remember that they have responsibilities. And I'm saying that, Mr. Speaker, is because from the time the vaccine came, I got vaccinated. I have even taken the booster, and I'm waiting on the day when we will be able to walk the streets of Castries, walk around St. Lucia without the mask. I'm encouraging the people of St. Lucia to cooperate. Work with the government of St. Lucia. Let us work together so that we can return to more normal. We can go back to economic activities. Our children are back in school. The businesses are opening slowly. And the faster they move in protecting themselves, the easier it will be for the rest. The Ministry of the Public Service have seen the need to enter in social dialogue with employers, unions, government, and civil society. This is how good governance operates. You consult the people, you represent the people, and you let the people have a say in the policies that would guide them on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, the Department of the Public Service, and more specifically, the Public Sector Modernization Division, which is charged with the responsibility of changing the customer experience in the public service in St. Lucia, has started great work. Many persons may be a little fearful that they may lose their job because we are moving into modern technology, but that may not be the case. The Public Sector Modernization Division, this unit is there to deliver a better customer service experience to the citizens, and it is in this process, it is in the process of implementing these projects that will rebound more accessible, quicker, and more consistent and reliable service to our people. The Government Island-wide Network, GNET, completion of GNET installation at 32 sites with the installation of 92 access points around St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, we speak to the Digital Government Service Platform, DigiGov, testing and user acceptance, stakeholder engagement, legislative changes, development and testing of national authentication framework 100% complete. Integration testing and civil status 90% complete. Development and testing of COVID-19 digital certificate 100% complete. The statistics shows that total registered users 7,922. Online transactions 40% online, 60% counter. Payments 29% online and 71% counter payments. And we are proceeding until we reach 100%. Mr. Speaker, the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, achievement to date, project coordinator and procurement specialist hired, finance specialist and environmental and social specialist co-op, regional skills development assessment, 6 of 14 proposals selected to tender. Meetings and stakeholder visit to facilitate digital services, smart classrooms and training for vulnerable groups, students and teachers with the Ministry of Education. Connectivity devices for civil servants to promote working remotely. Labor management plan, stakeholder engagement plan completed. Resettlement policy framework completed. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Home Affairs. The Department of Home Affairs was one most persons question, how would I handle that? Well, it still remains a Department of Home Affairs. As Minister responsible for Home Affairs, I attended my first meeting with management, the management team, and I became acquainted with the key issues surrounding the work program and the various departments in that unit. Mr. Speaker, on the 14th of September, I did a familiarization tour at Bordelais Correctional Facility. In my first 100 days, that's where I kicked off, because that is the end point for many of us who know of persons who have gone on the other side of the law. I did a tour of Bordelais. I had a meeting with management, and Bordelais Correctional Facility has many challenges. And I have since put a committee in place of the important and significant stakeholders for us to look at reform and reconstitute the Bordelais Correctional Facility to respond to the many challenges they have. One is an ailing institution that has been there for 20 years, and there is a lot of repairs. There are issues of security, there are issues in management and resources. And we have institutions like the Visiting Justice. You have other agencies that have keen interest in the correctional facilities in St. Lucia, and we are going to address that. In the first 100 days, Mr. Speaker, I met the association, the Welfare Association, representing the employees at Borderley Correctional Facility. They too have indicated that they have challenges, and we are working at addressing some of the issues. Mr. Speaker, on 20th October, under my watch, the police administration section, and some persons have indicated that they are confused as to who is in charge of the police. The Prime Minister has explained, and I'm explaining again. The police service, under the watch of the Prime Minister, has given me the charge of administration for the police, while he holds the fort for operations and security. The administration of the police, we have to ensure that they have suitable facilities to work. They have all the equipment they need. The work environment is the best, so they would not complain that they have not been able to do the work because the conditions of service have not been the best. So that is the area that I take charge of. And so far, we are looking at, with discussion with Cabinet and the Prime Minister, the issue of getting the Groside police station in place. We are looking at repairing the Viewfort police station, and we are also looking at the construction of the police headquarters and also the headquarters for the fire service. They are deeply concerned about that, and they have met the eyes and intention of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers. Mr. Speaker, the fire service. The fire service have received quite a bit of attention during my first 100 days. I have met the fire chief. I have met the management of the fire service. I have done a tour of the fire service headquarters in Castries, and they are grieved that for almost a decade they need better working conditions. They also have issues with staffing, and the Prime Minister gave specific instruction that we address the needs, and they are very happy that we are paying attention to the officers who played a critical role in fighting COVID. They were the first responders with ambulance to save many lives in St. Lucia. And the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Ministers are very grateful for the role that the fire service and our frontline workers have played in fighting COVID. Mr. Speaker, under my watch, we have to deal with citizenship and permanent residency in St. Lucia. The numbers are coming fast and furious, and it is also an area of concern for me as minister, because we have to watch the trend to find out whether people are from a certain country, certain parts of the world, are using St. Lucia as stepping ground for them to get citizenship. So I'm paying very close attention to this. But for the first 100 days, I can report that citizenship by descent under Section 3 of the Act, we have awarded 19. Citizenship by descent under Section 5 of the Act, 100. Citizenship by registration, Section 6 of the Act, 43. And citizenship by naturalization under Section 8 of the Act, 2. Residency, 7. So we are still holding the fort that we don't open the floodgate to allow any and everybody to become a citizen of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I had discussion with the probation and parole unit in Home Affairs, and they have the challenges, and we are putting a new structure in place so that we look at the work that they are doing and how they can best respond. They are actually moving into a new environment in terms of location. That space has been secured, and they are happy that they will get a better working environment. For the first 100 days, Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet of Ministers, with recommendations from my ministry, we have formulated the Police Complaints Commission, has been appointed, and the Board of Visiting Justice has been allowed to continue to function. They have been doing a great job, and I need to commend them for that. Mr. Speaker, we move to the Department of Labor, and we know the challenges in dealing with employers and dealing with workers. And I must report that for my 100 days, I have met the Trade Union Federation and the National Workers Union. They have indicated that they are willing to work with the government to advance the country and to deal with the COVID-19 situation. Mr. Speaker, the government of St. Lucia, under the watch of the Prime Minister, we believe, as I said, in dialogue. And I have had meetings not just with the Trade Union Federation as a body, but meetings with the individual trade unions. And so far, I have met the Civil Service Association, I have met the members of the National Workers Union, I have met members of the correctional officers at Bodley, and I have a series of meetings planned with the individual trade unions. Mr. Speaker, I need to remind you that without taking care of our people, without taking care of their welfare, we will not be making much progress. And as a Labour government, we are concerned about the interests of workers in this country. Moi, je veux tout Saint-Lucien savent, gouvernement Labour concerné à sous situation travailleur. Avec nous qui travailleurs jouent une justice, travailleurs jouent une satisfaction. Avec petit, ça nous joue un confort. Malgré le gouvernement qui était là, qui était vide, mais ça qui là, nous avons fait qu'on nous paye pour nous prendre travailler à cette lycée. We are actually engaging now in labor employment in Canada, and there are some new initiatives coming up, Mr. Speaker, where they are requesting 50 women to work in Nova Scotia. We are also looking for employment of persons in other areas and not just farm laborers. And we are actually working with the OECS, and we are looking at increasing our numbers, and there are some 300 persons who may get the opportunity to move on and have periodic employment overseas while we are trying to build and rebuild this economy. Mr. Speaker, occupational safety and health is critical. And to date, we have a draft policy that we are finalizing to go to Cabinet for approval. Mr. Speaker, I did mention the importance of dialogue, and the Department of the Public Service, the Department of Labor, we engage in a social dialogue to look at the issue of vaccination in the workplace. It's a very hot debate, but the employers, the trade unions, government, and civil society, we are about to reach close to what we call a position paper. And by the end of this week, we should have the first draft for discussion among the stakeholders, and that will be forwarded to Cabinet in the near future. Mr. Speaker, during the last 100 days, I reviewed and approved over hundreds of work permits. Although work permits generate income for St. Lucia, I'm also very concerned that we do not just give work permit for giving sake, because that will deny our people opportunities for work. So I'm scrutinizing requests for work permit very closely so that it does not involve persons who are coming in and having the skills that our St. Lucian people have. We have to put our people first. That is what Labour Party said. We put you first. And if we do not have St. Lucians with the necessary skills, then we allow persons from the Caribbean and outside to come in to work. Mr. Speaker, nous dit, nous pouvons mettre ces gens cette Lucia avant. Avec nous bataille ménager d'or pour venir travailler, les cette Lucien ça fait travail là. Et c'est ça moi là pour faire, là il vient pour work permit, depuis nous ni cette Lucien qui a fait travail là ou pas qu'à joindre work permit pour travailler cette Lucien. Nous voulons cette Lucien venir avant. Mr. Speaker, I move now to gender affairs. And when we talk of gender affairs, we talk of gender equality, we talk of gender equity, and we talk of gender sensitivity. And the first point of departure for my colleagues is gender sensitivity. And they have had a good crash course on gender sensitivity, and they are even reminding me sometimes. So I'm very, very pleased that we are moving. And I said gender equality and equity is not a competition between men and women. It is, we look at men and we look at women, and whichever of the gender is disadvantaged, we give that one more resources so that we have equality. We are not doing away with men, we're not doing away with women, but we are giving every citizen, whether man or woman, your rightful place in the society. The gender department is actually completing a program now on e-gender. And they actually got support to implement that program. And we had 59 women who are engaged in the tourism sector and 49 women in the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, we have completed a complementary funding initiative on the Engender project, which involves conducting of gender assessment in 5 sectors, prioritizing St. Lucia's National Adaptation Plan: education, health, tourism, infrastructure, and spatial planning and resilience ecosystem. And one sector prioritized in nationally determined contribution is energy through consultancy. Mr. Speaker, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, the St. Lucia Rural Women Advocacy Initiative was undertaken. This involves the training of women involved at various levels in agriculture, farming, agro-processing, fishing, and the use of technology as an advocacy and marketing tool. Mr. Speaker, the project gets underway in earnest on Thursday, November 4th, 2021, at the first consultation with prospective participants from the Network of Rural Women Producers, Helen's Daughters. And I'm proud to state that we have a young lady from Babolo who initiated that project, and we are bringing the women to modernize agriculture. We have farmers with disabilities, we have Beekeepers Association, and women involved in fishing and farming. Mr. Speaker, 20 women will be selected for the pilot and the Network of Rural Women Producers, and they will be the hosts for the program. I attended and addressed the launching of Helen's Daughters organization as they observe the International Day of Rural Women in Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, UNESCO has given us almost $50,000, and the purpose of this money, I'm pleased to report that it will involve a research project looking at boys' underachievement to explore the factors associated with the trend and development of gender-responsive instructional assessment and disciplinary material for use by teachers. The research is expected to begin during this month. Avec conserve un chaise jeune petit garçon, they fall by the wayside. Avec nous ne pouvons faire ça qui est nécessaire. Because les gens regardent bordelais, et pour une quantité de jeunes garçons, jeunes gens qui bordelais, nous ne pouvons faire ça qui est nécessaire. So that we prevent our boys from falling by the wayside, why they are not achieving in schools, and what we need to do to save them. Mr. Speaker, we are in the process of observing 16 days of activism where we look at gender-based violence. And the discussion has started around cabinet. There is a draft bill prepared by civil society and the gender department, and we want to take this bill forward so that St. Lucia can enact the gender-based violence bill. We have too much, and just too much. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, 19th November, is International Men's Day. We always speak about women, but we also have to pay attention to the men, because our young boys, they need good role models so that they can perform in our society. And that is what we talk about gender balance. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, 19th of November, I expect to get my birthday greetings.
You'll have to ask the leader of government business to schedule a meeting.
Yes, that he'll definitely do that.
The leader who? The opposition?
Mr. Speaker, during the last 100 days, I have attended hundreds of meetings with staff, trade union officials, special interest groups, and dignitaries to establish relationships and secure support for a number of initiatives being proposed to the government of St. Lucia. Some of the delegations include the Taiwanese ambassador, the UN Women, the French ambassador, the ambassador for the UK, and a number of very important persons who are willing to work with the government of St. Lucia to advance our development. Mr. Speaker, I did mention that we have a number of legislation that deals with discrimination in our society, and therefore we need to address that. And these are already on the books, under discussion in committees, and at some point it will catch the eye of the Prime Minister and Cabinet of Ministers. Mr. Speaker, let me turn quickly to the constituency of Babolo. During the last 3 months, I have succeeded in putting structures in place to manage the resources allocated to Babolo. Babolo te ka conduit vaille qui vaille. Mais moi ka mette système en place pour tout gens Babolo joindre comme ça gouvernement ka bail là. C'est pas si vous connaissez le ministre si c'est gens, mais si vous supposez joindre support ou ka joindre. Qui ou ka supporter les bas, qui ou pas ka supporter les bas, tout le monde n'est pour manger. During the last election, I asked the people in Babolo to support me. And I said, your choice, if you choose me, I will be your voice. Our choice, our voice. And my choice, my voice. Voji cares. C'est pour ça que je dis dans la house là pour me parler d'Aïsé Jean Babolo. The people in Babolo are very pleased that my colleague minister has spoken about giving recognition to Laverne Spencer. And we are very pleased with her achievement over the years. We have Kimani Melius. He just wrote me a letter and he said he needs some assistance and he's moving into Grenada, going to England to represent St. Lucia. We have Albert Reynolds, our javelin expert. Babolo has been the city of sports and we will continue to promote that. But, Mr. Speaker, this Labour Party government right now have found an empty post. But whatever we get will be, first, to put food on the table for the people. Help them pay the bills and let them take care of the medical bills, those who are sick. That is the priority for the Labour government and for the people in Babolo. Mr. Speaker, with the structure in place, let me thank Minister of Local Government. We have established our constituency council. We have 12 persons there. We have also formulated development committees. Out of 17, we have established 12 development committees. We have given 400 families in Babolo. They receive support for school supplies. And you could see the parents coming with pride. But there is one parent who took the contribution and went to gamble it. I have to have a case with that parent. Right. There are some parents that must not do that to the children. We have about 300 homes will be receiving the internet connection for the children to do the work. Mr. Speaker, about 28 families in Babolo would have received support for repair to their homes after Hurricane Elsa. Mr. Speaker, I have photographs. It's a pity we do not have the visual here to show you how some people in Babolo, their homes, the plywood has turned to paper. Plywood la tourne papier. And you can stay inside and see outside. That is what I inherited in terms of the homes. And the Labour Party has come to these people's rescue. Mr. Speaker, I ensure I secured through the Ministry of Youth and Sports. When he found out only 2 playing fields in Babolo were being maintained. And he has since yielded to my call. And whatever little resources that were allocated to Babolo, we split that. And every single playing field in Babolo now is clean. And the children can roll the ball. I have visited all the playing fields. I have visited all the health centers and gave instruction to clean around them. There was huge grass growing around the health centers. Mr. Speaker, many of the roads in Babolo, and thanks to the Minister of Infrastructure, he went with his potholing unit and he blocked a whole set of holes. Thank you.
To the blue wave.
The parliamentary rep was offered through the council. A resident in Babolo has offered her home to create a home for the elderly in Babolo. We have visited the structure and we are putting the logistics in place. Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary rep has so far met the farmers, especially the farmers in Maki. And one farmer told me, Madam Minister, it is not 3 months yet, and you have visited us. And the last parliamentary rep, after 5 years, he never visited them. I said, you don't have to know agriculture for you to be sensitive and concerned about farmers and those in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, we have distributed hampers to the older persons and to the needy people in Babolo. Mr. Speaker, many residents have started receiving street lights. Infrastructure Minister, thank you, continue, move faster. We have installed places that were dark, they couldn't get home, and they are seeing lights, and Labour Party is about bringing lights to the people. Mr. Speaker, I have been in constant negotiation with the Minister of Housing and his ministry. And during the campaign, I promised the people in Foaso, in Taiwan, to hold tight. Help is on the way. And I'm pleased to tell you that the minister, his ministry, we are looking at giving people who have been living on the land for over 40 years, we are going to give them title to the land. And that will come at a cost that is affordable. The land was some family land, they said. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get the paper. It was given to Housing Authority. And now it was given to another company, either a kind of stat. I don't know what stat it is. And that stat was ready to take on all the land. But we are going to secure. If it's not a fresh stat, it has to be a WASI stat. But we are going to give the people title to the land at a price that is reasonable and affordable. And the Minister of Housing do not want me to steal his thunder. I will leave it for him to make the announcement. So people at Taiwan, hold tight. Labour is delivering. Because I have always said, you cannot deliver. When a lady is pregnant, she cannot deliver unless she goes in labor. I have always said that. So that is why we are able to deliver. We are giving out the goodies and our people will get the benefit. I visited the fire station and the police station, and I was pleased to be accompanied by the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Fire, the Fire Chief. Mr. Speaker, I have visited all the schools in Babolo. There are 7 of them, 1 secondary and 6 primary. And the children are so excited to be in school. We cannot allow COVID to send our children back home. We have to fight COVID so that our children do not lose out on their education. They are not fortunate like some who can go overseas to school, but let them stay home and let us give them quality education. There has been some mitigation work done to clog drains and rivers all over the constituency. And we are ready now to erect the names of the communities in Babolo. Mr. Speaker, after 100 days, it looked like 100 years. There will be activities to generate work for thousands of people in Babono just before Christmas and into the new year. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister and Cabinet of Ministers. We have to put food on the table. Nous ni pour mettre manger à sous table pour moun manger. Nous ni pour bailler anti l'argent pour payer bill yo. Avec nous ni pour voir qui yo point que santé. C'est ça les parti qui a été premier. Now I am preparing to develop the human resource capacity of our young people. Our elderly persons in Babono need a caring facility. Our women and girls need support, and our boys at risk must be rescued. Mr. Speaker, as I wrap up my presentation, I want to thank you for your patient hearing. Let me thank the Almighty God, the people in Babono, the Prime Minister, and my fellow parliamentarians, the staff in the Ministry of Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs, and all St. Lucians, here and abroad, for their support and challenges and cooperation. So far, we just have to brace ourselves for the many challenges ahead. Let me thank the people of Babono for their continued support and confidence in me, and I will remain focused on the goals we have set ourselves to achieve, to improve the quality of life for all St. Lucians. We are putting you first. Premier. Mr. Speaker, I put you first and I thank you.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the adjournment of this honorable house till 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Members, the question is that the House sitting be suspended until 2 p.m. And now for the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Sitting suspended until 2 p.m.
Exit of the Speaker of the House, Honorable Claudius J. Francis, as the House has been suspended until 2 p.m. The lunch break is now on. In Primus, we heard from a number of the parliamentarians, the ministers, for this morning's session. We did hear from the Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, as he gave sort of synopsis of the 100 days for his administration, and that encapsulated some of the issues that the government is faced with at this moment. The Prime Minister spoke specifically to debt servicing, something that remains of immense concern for the country. The Prime Minister indicating that some 31% of government obligations is really for debt servicing accounts. The Prime Minister also reported that for the St. Jude Hospital, the review committee that has been put in place, the report is still pending with a 30-day thing that they have to report on. However, preliminarily, the report is indicating that some $118.05 million had been spent on the St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. And the Prime Minister indicated that there would be no provisions made by the previous administration for the phase 2, that is moving the operations of St. Jude from the stadium to its proper home. And so there is going to be, he indicated, a definitive move by his government to ensure that this is done. The review committee also for the Hiranora International Airport redevelopment project, the complete report is still pending. However, again, preliminarily, the Prime Minister indicated that his administration is committed to pursuing all avenues for the best value for St. Lucia. And thus far, there are indications that the cost for the project can be as high as 9% of the GDP of the country. Areas, he said, that is of extreme concern. We did hear from Honorable Kenson Casme, the Minister for Youth Development and Sports, and the MP for Grosley. And for him, big there in his delivery this morning, a presentation to the House, the Minister did speak very passionately about the National Sports Academy and the need to review the operations there to incorporate a sort of a village, as he described it, one that's going to really be focused on the science of sports, including a science lab, high performance facility, looking at camping rooms for various national organizations and associations and so forth, really opening up the facility so all of the Lucia sporting community can benefit. Also a review of the elite athletes program. Very quickly before Primus comes in, we did hear from Honorable Joachim Henry, the Minister for Equity, where he did give an account, especially for the home caregivers program, indicating that some 486 individuals providing care to the elderly, and out of that, some 83 individuals have had to have been displaced from that program, and due mainly to the ability of them being able to provide that service. The minister speaking passionately about the Boys Training Center and the reviews that will be done there, the staffing reviews, a review of the physical space, the systems that are there in order for there to be a smooth running of that facility. Very central to that is the relocation plans to be resumed. Those talks had been halted back in 2020 due to COVID-19. The Hurricane Elsa Recovery Program also of focus there for Honorable Joachim Henry, some $3 million allocated. Very, very key in there is the renovation of homes affected during that hurricane there to be made more resilient. So that is going to be an absolute necessity and key component to that. And we heard finally from Dr. Virginia Albert Poyer, Honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Poyer, the Minister for Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor, Gender Affairs, and who's also the MP for Babonneau, indicating that a new unit is going to be formed there under the Gender Affairs to look at youth at risk, that a new unit to come. She also spoke to public sector modernization, the committee now being formed to look at reform at the Bodily Correctional Facility under the portfolio of Home Affairs. The physical structure, security and management issues continue to plague the Bodily Correctional Facility, all of those to be reviewed. And of course the minister giving the undertaking that the issues confronting our police and fire service will be addressed. The Grosley VA4 Police and Fire Headquarters to be looked at intently with a view to resolving all of those issues there. And so when we come back from the lunch break, we'll continue to hear on the reporting of the 100 days. So far, everyone has given a overview of what has taken place within their particular quarter of government for the 100 days, and we'll be seeing that continuing into the afternoon session. Primus?
Merci, Lisa. Vitement, nous tenons présentation par les membres parlement concerné pour 100 jours depuis le gouvernement en pouvoir et que ça a déjà accompli. Le Premier ministre a commencé avant et qui parlait sur divers projets pour adresser comme aéroport Hiwanora qui a fait en neuf, regardé comment ça peut faire primaire, mettre consultation sur ça, et aussi l'hôpital Saint-Jude, c'est ça là, et qui a regardé très sérieux, aussi divers arrangements en place pour maladie corona, et c'était solution, c'était soulagement à faire crime et pour affaire marijuana et affaire comme ça il a fait être plus facile pour les gens qui n'ont plus ni service ça là et comment le gouvernement a regardé pour législation pour améliorer la situation marijuana c'est aussi le ministre qui a une responsabilité pour Gozile, on a Kenson Casimir parler puis là sur développement sport, mais principalement institution, éducation pour sport. Ça c'est grand affaire sport en Gozile qui a mis un peu d'effort pour élever et pour agrandir et pour faire travail et puis meilleur qui travaille en présent, ça c'est Sports Academy et aussi divers travail j'ai fait sur divers développement sport en divers côté en Paris Gozile côté mettre lumière indigènes côté pour Grand Bowl c'est qualité c'est pour qui fait à ça aussi ministre qui est responsable pour Sud-Est Castries ça c'est honorable Joachim Henry pour la assistance pour moun qui plus négligent et c'est mon qui a assisté c'est mon qui a créé qui passe à faire pour qualité de développement qui a fait à ce support santé c'est différents côtés et diverses protections sociales programme protection sociale et divers projets qui sont en place côté banque développement Caribbean qui a assisté et c'est divers arrangements qui ont fait plusieurs façons pour ça établir affaires sociales avec égalité un programme ça là c'est tous ces développements ça là nous avons pris en cette semaine qui a venu associer une nouvelle là en créole et en anglais dernièrement ça se représentatif pour Babono Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot parlait sur ces divers ça qui a représenté ligne de sécurité service public labourer et qui a fait nom avec femme après cette aussi mais ça qui est plus important c'est établissement en division pour assister la jeunesse qui a risque et mettre un arrangement en place pour assister à d'une façon côté pour aider ces jeunesse là qui besoin de direction et guide pour mettre ça en place pour aider et aussi là ce travail qu'a fait pour travailler à ces fraudes garde là comme Gozile vieux fort et pour bâtir un établissement neuf pour police à cette ici et service pompier à cette ici il parle sur divers programmes pour femmes qui ont point court avant c'est des femmes qui allaient au Canada pour travailler et ça c'est un programme neuf qui a commencé pour aider les femmes ni à Caribbean ni à cet pays Caribbean et aussi à Canada aussi et qui parlait sur divers programmes qui a fait en commune qui a représenté toute Paris en l'école monde qui besoin caille diverses assistances qui a commencé en ces diverses places en Babono et toutes ces nouvelles salles nous avons pris à ce durant 36 semaines à venir en nouvelle ni en anglais et à créole. Merci à toi.
Thank you very much, Primus. And this is where we ended the broadcast for this hour, the morning session having concluded. We will be back with you as the afternoon session begins within the next hour. On behalf of Primus Hutchinson, I'm Melissa Joseph. Until next time.